And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off.
Go ahead and say it, Ed. Go Tigers!
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
You like that? You like that?
F it. Jamar's down there somewhere.
The New Orleans Saints select Marcus Davenport.
No!
Splash Brothers. Yeah.
It's playoff. Keep going, Brace.
The playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Welcome back to Dirty Boots Sports, Chasing the Trophy Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Derek Sanders, your host. This evening, we're going to jump right on into after week 14 injuries and waiver wire heading into week 15. First and foremost, though, I want to give a shout out to our first sponsors for Dirty Boots Sports. That's Big Reed BBQ sauce. All of these sponsors, you can find their products on Facebook. I've already looked and searched myself, and they're very easy to find. All you have to do is search the name, go straight to their product page, and then it has the link for their web page. And then I think even some of them you can buy on the Facebook page. But I want to give them a shout out. These are our first sponsors. We really appreciate them jumping on board with us here at Dirty Boot Sports, specifically, the main show. And then I really appreciate everything that Dirty Boot Sports does as far as covering sports. And we all really enjoy doing this more than, it's definitely something we enjoy doing more as a hobby than it is really a job, as any of the guys will say. But Big Reed BBQ, we really appreciate your support. Also, Elevate Clothing Line, elevate your style to the next level. Their clothing line can be found and shopped for on Facebook as well. And then Automotive Detailing Solutions. Those guys are excellent out of Jonesboro, can get your car immaculate just in time for the family coming to see you for Christmas, or going to see the family when you want your vehicle to be spotless, to impress your in-laws or whoever's coming to see, whoever you're going to see. And for those New Year's parties, Christmas parties at work, go see Automotive Detailing Solutions there out of Jonesboro and Jackson Parish. And that's our three main sponsors, our three sponsors right now. We really appreciate the support that they give us and backing up the show and everything that we do here at Dirty Boot Sports. Now, we're going to really roll right on in. We've got a lot to cover on this episode. A little bit of news and headlines. Kyler Murray is gone to play Warzone some more because he tore his ACL. It's not really funny because he tore his ACL, but honestly, the way he has been this year, I don't think that the Arizona Cardinals are going to miss him too much. Probably be happy that they're not going to have the disruption in the locker room that he was causing before. And heck, they might be better off with Colt McCoy now. And honestly, this going forward is really going to put into question if they're going to stick with him, stick with Cliff Kingsbury. Obviously, with him gone, that really decreases their chances of doing anything this year, which they had already pretty much started tanking, I think, because they really don't have any chance to win their division or get a wild card spot for that matter, honestly. But I think they stick the year out with Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think he comes back. I think they hire some new, fresh, young coach, either coming out of college or some coordinator, somebody just new to come in there and help kind of mesh with Kyler Murray, because they've already signed him to such a long deal and committed. I don't think they move on from him just yet. Hopefully, he can mature some of the offseason through Warzone. They say it's a pretty realistic game. Maybe he can mature through it. Who knows? But Kyler Murray's done for the year, torn ACL. He can play all the Warzone he wants now. Mike White, man, what can you say? I mean, really bringing back some old school, playing through the pain in his game. Really reminded me a little bit of the Justin Herbert game when he broke that rib cartilage and stuck it out through the game. Could barely throw. Mike White gets hit in the ribs, comes back, gets hit in the ribs again. Like, just you can tell he's struggling to finish the game, play the game, and honestly, just a really impressive performance from a grit standpoint. And I think he really impressed. I mean, he already had impressed his locker room, but I think that just took it to a whole nother level of him putting his body on, and really, rib injuries can be dangerous if you have a broken rib, puncture a lung. I mean, that can be serious stuff right there. And he put it on the line trying to play through to help his team win. They unfortunately didn't win, but he gave it his all. That's all that matters. And they're saying he got hospitalized after the game as a precaution and ended up getting discharged to fly back with the team, so he was okay. Everything checked out fine, which is good. And they're saying he has a good chance to play this weekend. They're going to try to do some pain management blocks on his ribs, which is good news for the offensive players because Lord knows we don't need to see Zach Wilson back out there and everybody's production goes back to the tank. And there could be a chance that we see Joe Flacco and not Zach Wilson, but we won't really know till we get closer to game time. And then last but not least, boy, the Saints are first to get fined for faking an injury in NFL history. Sweet mother. I don't even know what to say about this. I know the guys have talked about this on their show already. There's no doubt. I mean, what else can you say? Typical Roger Goodell going after the Saints franchise. I don't know what it is. Lord willing, if he listens to this podcast, you suck, Roger Goodell. That's all I can say about it. I'm sorry about that, but I mean, it's just sad. You can't know if somebody's faking an injury for sure. Do I think that it's taken advantage of sometimes? Sure, especially in late game time situations. But the Saints didn't even win the game for Pete's sake. So it didn't even matter. All right. And you're still going to penalize the team that lost the game. I mean, come on now. I think that's ridiculous, but I'm going to move on because we have so many injuries to cover after this week that are fairly relevant and a lot of really good players to get to. So we're just going to keep moving on. But yep, Saints first ever in NFL history to get fined for faking an injury during a game. And it looks like the NFL is going to be looking closer at this. So, heaven forbid somebody get hurt at the end of the game, can't make it off the field and fall down. You better hope that the NFL believes you. Otherwise, you're looking at hefty fines. And I think somebody said, let me see if I can find out the total. $350,000 total. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, moving on. We're going to jump right on into our injuries. We'll start, obviously, most owned players and kind of work our way down. Excuse me, my throat's been really dry throughout the weekend. Weather heating up, cooling off. You just never know. Just bear with me as we make it through this pod. But Tyreek Hill, ankle injury, finished the game, played through it, should be okay. Obviously, as big time as he is, they're going to be managing his reps throughout the week. So I'm sure he's going to probably be limited just about every day, except for maybe Friday. Just be watching his practice reps. He's going to get a lot of managed reps where he does at this point in the season. A lot of these veteran players, they just don't need all those extra reps to get ready for a game, especially some of the ones that rely on their physical ability as much as like Tyreek Hill does. He makes those plays that you just can't practice in practice. So I expect him to be limited a fair amount this week and then probably get in a full practice right at the end of the week. And almost honestly, exact same thing with CMC. CMC played the whole game. Honestly, they leaned on him heavy. Brock Purdy got hurt. Deebo Samuel went down with a knee injury and ankle injury. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But CMC popped up on the injury report with a knee injury. I mean, I think it's the same thing that we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks with him. He was limited in practice Monday. No specific injury, so we don't think it's anything that he come up with during the game. It's just maintenance related likely. shouldn't be anything to worry about going into this weekend, but keep an eye on his practice status, obviously toward the end of the week. Josh Jacobs, if you got a chance to see it on Thursday night, dislocated his pinky finger during the game, finished the game. Really impressive, honestly. Another really especially if we're a running back having to hold the ball and get handoffs like that and grip the ball like they do, that's an extremely painful thing. And really impressive to see him push through it. X-rays were negative, so that means it didn't break anything. But typically, when you dislocate a finger, you either you strain or tear a ligament at least partially to get that dislocation, but normally doesn't cause you to miss any time. And a lot of the times, what they can do, there, I'll go over this a little bit more because there was another finger injury later on that we're going to talk about. But a lot of times, what they do, they buddy tape it, tape two fingers together, and it's really normally not an issue for players to kind of push through that. So I don't expect him with it not being broken. I don't expect him to miss any time. But just watch his practice schedule just to make sure. T. Higgins, God bless anybody that started and played T. Higgins. They said he was good to go. Ended up starting the game, played one snap, and they pulled him. That's terrible for T. Higgins owners. If you started him thinking he was going to play, plays one snap, gets you no points. Hopefully, if you did play him, you didn't miss the playoffs. If it was coming down to that, but coach said he's day to day. He was a game time decision coming in. Got greenlit, pulled him after one play. What I'm hearing analysts say is that they were being abundantly cautious, so that might be good news that they pulled him after that one play. So he should be getting healthier and have a good chance to play this weekend. But I'll just watch his practice schedule to see. But that's T. Higgins with a hamstring injury. Then, like I alluded to earlier, Deebo Samuel got carted off the field. Essentially, looked like a terrible knee injury. Ended up being a knee and an ankle injury, an MCL and an ankle sprain on his left side. The coach came out, said it's not season ending, no significant damage, no surgery required, nothing like that. But at best, he's coming back week 17 or 18. And honestly, excuse me, with as good as the 49ers are playing right now, winning, getting by without him, I would expect them to sit him as long and as much as possible to let him get healthy for a playoff run. I mean, their defense is looking lights out. I mean, pretty much, anybody you put in at quarterback back there is looking like the next Tom Brady, as we'll talk about here in a little bit. And so I don't see any reason for them to rush him back. If I had Deebo, I don't know if I'd drop him. If you got IR slot, he's not going on IR, but if he's ruled out, you can slip him into there. Otherwise, you just kind of got to leave him on the bench until if he's coming back. Moving on, Ramondre Stevenson. This one hurt a lot of people, including me. At least I wasn't relying on him to make it into the playoffs, but it will hurt my seeding a little bit because I had him in 3 leagues. He got ruled out fairly early in the game with an ankle injury. They have not updated anything about that since it was just on Monday night. I'm not shocked. I would just keep an eye out for it to see if he comes back. We're going to talk about his replacement here in a little bit, but that was Ramondre Stevenson, ankle injury. Just kind of keep an eye for an update and see if they say anything about his status for the rest of the week. Lamar Jackson, knee injury, he ended up getting ruled out. Still did not practice as of today. So I really don't think he's coming back this week. I mean, he's going to have to start getting some limited practices in, but I doubt it very seriously. And I threw this in here. He's not exactly where, and I'm not somebody I normally talk about since it is related to Lamar Jackson, though. Tyler Huntley got knocked out of the game with a concussion. And I'll be honest, I'm not even 100% who that third string quarterback is. but I don't think it was significantly irrelevant considering that I did not see that many points scored coming out of that game. And I don't think I would want a third string quarterback, even with a Baltimore running offense, but they just don't have the pass catching playmakers that you need to support a third string quarterback like the 49ers do. But Tyler Huntley, concussion ruled out. I would almost bet that he does not play this weekend. Right now, if you get a concussion, you're averaging being out 9 to 10 days. Even if you come back to practice, it's taking about 9 to 10 days to clear concussion protocol on average. So good chance he's not going to play this week. That's Tyler Huntley. Mari Cooper came out of his game with a hip injury, played through the injury, but you could tell it really limited him. Deshaun Watson really leaned on Donovan Peoples-Jones, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. But his hip injury, they're calling Amari Cooper day to day. Played through it. I'd watch his practice schedule. If he played through it, chances are they're going to manage his reps, let him kind of get a lot of extra treatment on that hip, and I'd be willing to bet that he's going to play this weekend. Kenneth Walker ended up getting ruled out. It was originally called an ankle injury, but then they're calling it a calf strain now. But ruled out. He was limited in practice on Monday, which is huge. If he's back practicing, I'd be willing to bet that he has a good chance to play. Knowing Pete Carroll, if somebody's practicing even on a limited basis, they're probably going to play. So that's Kenneth Walker. Just keep an eye out, but that speaks a lot for DJ Dallas's value, which is not practicing, and Travis Homer and Tony Jones' value. Next, Dameon Pierce ankle injury. They're calling it a mild left high ankle sprain. No significant damage, but he's probably going to miss at least a week. And then I got a notification right before this pod that they are already ruling him doubtful, and it's almost assumed that he will be ruled out this week. So don't look to have Dameon Pierce this week in his matchup this weekend. So just kind of hang on to him because he should be coming back next week, I would imagine. Next, Pat Freiermuth, as if the tight end position could not get any thinner, played through a foot injury that he suffered during the game. I did not see this game, but apparently I talked to a couple people that did watch it, and you could tell that he had a foot injury that he was playing through, which is not good. Normally that means they're showing some kind of signs of that injury. It's probably limiting their mobility. And typically when you're playing during the game, you got enough adrenaline going to do more than you normally can. And then after the game, you're going to be even more limited. So I would expect him to probably be ruled out fairly at least midway through the week. I just don't see him trying to gut it out. And there really is no reason for him to play. Pittsburgh's not really playing for anything right now. I think Pat Freiermuth has proved enough this year. He's been a top 10 tight end. And honestly, playing, and even if he did play, Kenny Pickett suffered a second concussion in like a month. So he's definitely going to be out this weekend. And then you're going to have to deal with Trubisky throwing to Pat Freiermuth, which was not very fruitful at the beginning of the season, or not. I mean, it was okay. But either way, Trubisky leading this offense was not what you want to see at the beginning of the year with its struggles. So Pat Freiermuth, foot injury, just watch for his practice schedule. But even if he does play, I don't know if I'd play him. We just already talked about Kyler Murray tore his ACL. DJ Moore, I didn't know what happened. I thought he was just pulling another DJ Moore. I started him in one of my leagues, and I looked on there. He had 2 rushes for 6 yards and I think maybe 1 target, no catches. And I was like, what? And they never said he was injured, never ruled him out. But apparently he played through it, but he had an ankle and a knee injury. They're calling him day to day. They're saying it's nothing significant, but they're not. And they're saying he's going to undergo more testing, but they're not saying exactly what's going on or what their expectations are. Given where they're at, I don't see any reason for them to rush him back. Obviously, if it's really not that big of a deal, he will come back and play. And I really thought he would have had a better game with Sam Darnold at the helm, but he did not. So just keep an eye on his practice schedule. I think this will be an outlier that if he was the injury that happened early on and limited him, I really think Sam Darnold can bring him back to life for the end of fantasy season if anybody has him in the playoffs. Cortland Sutton, hamstring injury, got ruled out. There hasn't been an update. I really don't expect anything out of this. I mean, Denver's another one of those teams. They're not really playing for anything. I'm pretty sure I know Russell Wilson suffered a concussion during that game, and he almost, I think somebody said or posted that he got knocked out. He's probably lucky he didn't end up in the hospital because I seen the hit. It was pretty rough. But anyway, Cortland Sutton, hamstring injury ruled out, no update. Just keep an eye on his practice schedule, but hopefully you're not relying on him to play if you made the playoffs. David Njoku came back, had an excellent game. I really think this is just managing the reps for a key player, but he has a knee injury he has a knee injury designation. But he was limited Tuesday. I think this is just one of those where they're watching his reps, just kind of letting him rest up, heal up. He should be out there again this weekend, but just keep an eye on his practice schedule. Jeff Wilson Jr. Came out of the Miami game with a hip injury. He's been, and I think he got ruled out if I'm not mistaken, but he's been being called day to day. But then, I mean, you take this as you see it, but as the coach stated, the results are more positive than the worst case scenario. I mean, I'm trying not to read too far into the tea leaves here, but that does not give me much hope for Jeff Wilson Jr. if the coach says they're more positive than the worst case scenario. That's a pretty wide range of outcomes because I would think worst case scenario is like a severed limb or something like that. But I mean, at least season injuring, but they're more positive than that, whatever that means. Who knows? And then my buddy Kyle on the main podcast, this is what we would call a John Madden quote. I mean, the late great John Madden had some of the most famous quotes, and I used to love hearing them on the Madden football games growing up, and they were hilarious. But this seems like something that he would say, but they're more positive than the worst case scenario. So that's what they're saying about Jeff Wilson. If you got him, you've been riding him. Hopefully it's nothing serious, but I'd keep an eye on an update. But as of right now, there's nothing more than that. Tyler Boyd, there's that other pinky finger injury dislocated. Unlike Josh Jacobs, it happened on the third play of the game, and he was ruled out after that and did not play the rest of the game after 3 plays. Which is, I mean, I kind of get it because you're wide receiver, you got to catch the ball, but it is possible. They said the X-rays were negative. He's day to day. Just keep an eye on his practice status, but I would think he has a good chance to play, especially if for some reason T. Higgins is out. You want to be firing up Tyler Boyd in your lineup. Next be Jacoby Myers with a head injury. They called it a concussion after they called it a head injury early on last week. Jacoby Myers ended up getting ruled out before the game. There's been no update. They just played on Monday night. Probably even took the day off today to recover. So I expect there to be an update come out sometime tomorrow on his status. But I would think that he has a decent chance to come back because I don't think he has a lengthy history of concussions. Next, all-time sellout, Brandon Cooks. Calf injury was ruled out prior to the game. There's been no update. Honestly, this is his scapegoat just to get out of having to play somewhere because he's upset because he didn't get to play for a championship and blah, blah, blah. He wants a participation trophy at the end of the year. Maybe they'll give him one. Who knows? No update. Brandon Cooks ruled out. Honestly, I don't expect him to play if he even has a hangnail. So next and last, certainly but not least, just another casualty of the tight end position, Hayden Hurst, with a calf injury, ended up getting ruled out prior to the game. And then coach came out and said he is more week to week than day to day, which does not bode well for his status for this week coming up. So I would not hold your breath. Watch to see if he can practice, but with the coach saying he was week to week today, I would be willing to think that he will not be playing this weekend. And that is finally going to round out our injuries. And we're just going to roll right on into our waiver wire. And these are the top waiver wire targets to me after week 14 that are owned in less than 60% of leagues. So there's several guys that are owned in a little bit over 60% of leagues. Pretty much if they're right at 60, I'll throw them in there as a caveat. But for the most part, if they're over like 61 or so, I'm not going to mention them on this. So if there's some guy that's going to get a lot of playing time that's like right over 60, you're like, why did he say something about this guy? That's why, because he's over 60%, and that's just the way that we decided to run this part of the pod. And so we're going to jump right on into running backs. Number one's got to be Jerick McKinnon. I mean, the number one running back in PPR in the NFL this week, in one of the best, if not the best offense in the league. He's the number one pass catching running back in Kansas City. You got Pacheco running the ball. You got McKinnon catching the ball. I mean, he had 7 catches for 114 yards and a touchdown, busted a big one on a trick play from Mahomes. You know, a lot of people can say that's a fluke, but with Mahomes, I mean, he's got a couple trick plays every game. And if Jerick McKinnon's going to be in there and passing down with a chance to catch that, I think you could do a lot worse than having Jerick McKinnon fill in for you at running back for Dameon Pierce or Jeff Wilson Jr. or somebody like that. I like Jerick McKinnon a lot. And this week he's at Houston, the 31st, their 31st defense against the running back, which is an excellent matchup. And Jerick McKinnon has back-to-back relevant weeks. I think he had 14 points week before, and then 41 points this past week. So I'd be looking for Jerick McKinnon. He's barely owned out there. I would think like 30% of leagues. Number 2 for me at running back is going to be Pierre Strong Jr. This is strictly based off of the Ramondre Stevenson injury. And I like Pierre Strong Jr. a lot more than Kevin Harris for the main reason that Pierre Strong is the more electric back. You can see it when they play. He's also the pass catching back, which is who you want. He was a deep sleeper for several analysts that I listened to early on in the year to kind of emerge as that James White role. He's a very James White-esque player. Possibly a little bit more hard-nosed than James White, seeks out contact a little bit more, but real quick, wiry, and a good pass catcher. If Ramondre Stevenson misses any time, I like Pierre Strong Jr. a lot to fill that role more. I think it's going to be a committee between Strong and Harris. I think Harris will get more handoffs, but I think Strong's going to be there more on the pass catching work. As long as he doesn't mess up his pass blocking, which is a big thing for Bill Belichick. So cross your fingers. But if he gets in there and misses a pass block, you're probably not going to get any more points from him for the rest of the game. But I like Pierre Strong Jr., and he's got a good matchup this week coming up at Las Vegas. They're 27th against the run. So he's really explosive. He can get in there. I mean, it does not take much for him to get a big play. So he's my number 2. Number 3, honestly, if it wasn't for Michael Carter coming back, Zonovan Knight would be number 2 over Pierre Strong. But Zonovan Knight still getting a lion's share of the work, no pun intended, because they're playing at home against Detroit Lions this week. But he's still getting a lion's share of the work with Michael Carter, who came back this week. So I think it could be a good chance that they're going to be playing from behind because Detroit's offense has been playing so well here lately. I think there's a decent chance that they could be playing from behind. If that's the case, they're going to be throwing the ball more. I like the chances of Zonovan Knight getting those opportunities. But honestly, I think they're just feeling out to see what they have in Zonovan Knight. Even though Michael Carter's back, they know what they have in him. But I like Zonovan Knight. He's my number 3. Number 4, this is kind of a dart throw, honestly. This has more to do with volume. It's Chuba Hubbard. I mean, Dante Foreman got 21 carries. Chuba Hubbard got 14. And I think Carolina ran the ball 35 to 40 times. So I know they did because I just named off 36 right there. And then I think Rashid Blackshear got 9 carries. So they ran the ball almost 50 times last week. And Chuba Hubbard's getting the second most of those carries. They're playing at home versus Pittsburgh this week. A little bit of a tougher matchup with Pittsburgh because TJ Watt being back, but they're running the ball so much, and Chuba, and you're just rolling the dice and hoping he gets the touchdown, which he did this past week, and he was more efficient than Dante Foreman. I think he had 14 carries for 74 yards and a touchdown. Dante Foreman had 21 carries for 75 yards, no touchdown. So, you're kind of rolling the dice, but Chuba Hubbard's barely owned in any leagues. So there's your chance at a dart throw at a touchdown if you need a flex play. Number 5 for me is going to be Gus Edwards. I know J.K. Dobbins came back. He had a big week, but he was way more efficient, ripped off a big run, way more efficient than he's normally going to be. But Gus Edwards was extremely efficient. With them not having any decent quarterback to play, they're going to lean heavy on the run. They could run the ball 35, 40 times, honestly. And last week, Gus Edwards averaged 5.1 carries a game. 5.1 yards a carry, and looked really good with Dobbins. So I would not think it'd be out of the realm for Edwards to get 20 carries and Dobbins to get 15, because we know they're not going to lean too much on Dobbins. Had 2 knee injuries that caused him to be down for a fairly significant amount of time in the last 2 seasons. There's no reason for them to lean too heavy on Dobbins. So I like Gus Edwards a lot playing at Cleveland, and they're 29th against the run, so it's an excellent matchup. And then last but not least, this is no specific player in general, but if you've got extra spots on your bench, if you're not looking for anybody right now, like if you got your lineup set, you don't need to play any of these guys, don't pick these guys up. These are guys that you need to stream, that you're in a bind and you need to play somebody that's going to put up points now. Don't pick these guys up. Pick up the backup of a significant running back going down the stretch that could have a chance at injury that could give you, league winning value. Alexander Madison. There's Alexander Madison. Matt Breida could be one for New York Giants, not specifically, but Jalen Warren for Pittsburgh. If now they end up sitting Najee Harris toward the end of the year, I think he could be somebody that put up starters points for the end of the year. Kareem Hunt, he's owned everywhere, but there's plenty of those high end backups out there. Pick up one of those guys that has a good chance. Alexander Madison's number 1, obviously, but pick up one of those guys that has a chance to put up major points for you that nobody's looking at right now. And also, last but not least, after Dameon Pierce getting ruled out, honestly, he probably wouldn't have made the list anyway, but Rex Burkhead's probably going to be the primary beneficiary there in Houston. Could be the recently acquired Eno Benjamin. If he comes back, let me see. That was a name I thought about earlier today because he ended up getting traded there or getting picked up there by Houston. And I take that back. He will not be there because they ended up waiving him. So, unfortunate for him, they waived him today. I don't know why, because Dameon Pierce went down, but he logged 3 carries against Dallas this past week after Dameon Pierce went down. But anyway, Eno Benjamin and I think Dario Ogunbowale. Let me just double check. Yep, Dari Ogunbowale. That's going to be the primary beneficiaries there in Houston. So be looking for one of those, either Burkhead or Ogunbowale, if you can't get any of these other guys, if you're in a bind in a deep league. Moving on to wide receiver. This one is extremely deep this week. There's just too many guys that could really be beneficial for you down the stretch. if you have some of these key wide receivers that are battling injuries or that have went down for the season already, there's several guys on this list can fill in admirably. Number one is owned in 60.4% of leagues, but he's got to be number one. If he's out there, you got to pick him up. And honestly, you could plug him in at wide receiver 2, and he could probably do better than most of the wide receiver 2s out there right now. And that's Zay Jones. This week, going up against Dallas, kind of a tough matchup, but really, when you think about it, outside of Diggs, they don't have an extremely good, talented secondary. And they're 17th for against wide receivers, so not that great of a ranking for Dallas's defense. And he's owned 60% of leagues, but he may be the new number one wide receiver in Jacksonville. Honestly, he's getting more targets than Christian Kirk the last 3 weeks that he's played. Put up more points than him 3 of the 4 last weeks than Christian Kirk. And honestly, Trevor Lawrence is looking like he's ascending to that next level. Not the elite level, but possibly that level just underneath the elite level. You know, he's not there with Jalen Hurts. He's not there with some of those Joe Burrow, with Mahomes, with Josh Allen quite yet, but he's in that tier right below him, I believe. Because he really, you know, and I heard an analyst say this the other day, the best way to say is he looked surgical in his last game. So I like Zay Jones a ton. If he's out there, he's my number one. Number two for me is going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones. We had a good feeling getting a quarterback upgrade. It was going to really show in Donovan Peoples-Jones's box score, and it did this week for sure. Had 12 targets. I think it was 7 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown. And now he's going to get the 26th ranked against wide receivers at home in the Baltimore Ravens. And Amari Cooper's banged up. He'll probably play, but honestly, he'll be a decoy, which would be great for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Prime matchup. And I mean, you know, we're starting to see the fruits of that quarterback upgrade. So I like Donovan Peoples-Jones a lot. He's my number two. Number three for me, honestly, 3, 4, and 5, they're all could be swapped around multiple different ways, but number 3 for me is going to be Elijah Moore. Corey Davis went down with a concussion during his game, like we talked about earlier. Average time missed 9 to 10 days. So I don't expect Corey Davis to be back this weekend. They're playing at home against Detroit, who's 30th against wide receiver. You know, you got Garrett Wilson getting line share at number 1. He's going to get the number 1 cornerback. So Elijah Moore is going to step into that number 2 position. He's going to get the number 2 cornerback. The only way I don't play Elijah Moore this weekend against Detroit is if Zach Wilson plays. The only way. Because if Mike White's in there, he threw the ball to him 10 times. If Joe Flacco's in there, he threw the ball to him a fair amount earlier in the season when he started. That's when we thought Elijah Moore was going to bounce back, and then Zach Wilson comes in there, and, you know, Elijah Moore gives him the middle finger. Zach Wilson gives him the middle finger, and Zach Wilson's like, well, it's my ball. Throw it to who I want. Obviously, that's something like that happened in the locker room. And, you know, so we see Elijah Moore pretty much get no targets and want to be traded. And the coach talked him off the edge of the ledge. Probably because he knew that Zach Wilson was the problem, not Elijah Moore, which is sad in today's age. But needless to say, Zach Wilson doesn't start. I'm starting Elijah Moore at least in my flex position and picking him up off the waiver wire. But he's my number 3. Number 4 and number 5 are from the same team. But this guy, I think, has the potential and the talent, especially if you don't need anybody right now. This is one of those guys. Jameson Williams for the Detroit Lions. They're playing at the Jets. Not the best matchup. It's a pretty tough matchup. I think they're number 5 against wide receiver. But Jameson Williams played 11% of the snaps week before last. 1 target, no catch. That was it, right? Last week, 19% of the snaps. All right, 19%. Hardly anything. 2 targets. 1 of his catches went for 41 yards and a touchdown. Okay. Get him while you can before he plays anymore. If he can come in for 19% of the snaps, 2 targets, and bust a 41-yard touchdown, and he's only played the max he's played is 19% of the snaps in 2 games, and he's already done something like this. He was the number 1 wide receiver taken in the draft last year, the number 1 rated wide receiver in the draft last year. You got to pick this guy up for the playoffs. If you are stacked, you still pick him up, because I guarantee you in the playoffs they're going to see what this guy has. Detroit's looking like they're making a push to try to get a wild card spot. They're on a roll right now. Their offense is clicking. Jared Goff is looking good. Dan Campbell's got the locker room fired up. I mean, there's nothing else to say. Why would you not want one of the most talented young wide receivers in the league on your team, as he's starting to ascend to kind of claim his role in the offense? So I got Jameson Williams at number 4. Number 5 is going to be DJ Chark, because until Jameson Williams, who I think will claim that number 2 wide receiver role behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a lot of the analysts are saying that they think Jameson Williams will overtake Amon-Ra, which is hard to believe, but will overtake Amon-Ra St. Brown's number 1 spot, and Amon-Ra will be number 2. Eventually, it won't happen this year, obviously, but in the future, there's a lot of analysts that think that highly of him, that he will take that. But until that happens, DJ Chark is excelling in his matchups against the 2nd and 3rd cornerbacks on the opposing team. I don't think this will be any difference. DJ Chark is a freak of an athlete. Every time he is healthy, he puts up at least solid floor stats for you. If he gets injured, that's a different story. But when he's not injured, I think the least amount of points, when he hasn't been dealing with an injury during a game, least amount of points this season is like 9 points. And I think you could do worse than that at your flex position. And you always have that chance of him coming down with a touchdown. He's a big, tall wide receiver as well. So while he's healthy, you pick him up and play him if you can, if you need somebody this week. Number 6 and number 7. These are 2 guys coming off a bye that I talked about last week, and I kept them on here instead of ending it at 5 with DJ Chark, just for the sheer fact that I think they're going to be relevant again this week. But a lot of people are forgetting about them coming off a bye. Number 6 is going to be Alec Pierce for me, playing at Minnesota for Indianapolis. Really plus matchup. You know, the Detroit Lions just come off a game putting up 40-something points against Minnesota. And here we are. We got Indianapolis coming in, who can throw the ball okay. Not as good as a lot of people hope, but they still throw the ball a fair amount. Coming in at Minnesota in the Dome, so we don't have to worry about the weather. Alec Pierce seems to be getting a good connection with Matt Ryan. And Minnesota's 31st against the wide receiver plus matchup. Not to mention Alec Pierce is a red zone target for Matt Ryan, it seems, because he's getting a fair amount of red zone targets. So I like Alec Pierce a fair amount this week, coming off a bye. And then last but certainly not least, Jahan Dotson for Washington, playing at the New York Giants. Kind of a tough matchup. They're 10th against the wide receiver, but we know Terry McLaurin's going to draw the number 1 corner. Dotson's going to get the number 2, which is going to be a decent matchup for him. The week before the bye, he got 9 targets with Taylor Heineke. I expect him to keep that chemistry going. They're not going to bench Taylor Heineke while they're winning. And then not to mention, Jahan Dotson's been a red zone target, even though he's smaller. He's not a big guy, but he's one of them small, quick guys, and he just seems to get open and make big plays in the end zone. He's gotten a lot of red zone targets this year already. He's a red zone, just a big play waiting to happen. So I like Jahan Dotson. If you're looking for a Hail Mary there at the end of the year and you need a flex spot, I think you could do worse than Jahan Dotson for sure. That's going to wrap up my wide receivers. We're going to roll right on into tight ends, a.k.a. lawn darts. Honestly, it's turning into more and more like injury replacement central, because we've lost. I'm about to name off the waiver wire tight ends, but honestly, I'm about to name off probably ranked the top, 3 through, 9 tight ends, in the league right now, because all the ones that were in there between 1 and 10 have been injured in the last couple weeks. And it's really been kind of crazy. But number one on the list, and honestly might be close to number one. He's not number one overall for me in waiver wire target, but he's at least 2 or 3, and that's going to be Evan Ingram for Jacksonville. I mean, we just seen it last week. The chemistry he has with Trevor Lawrence is undeniable now. He put up the most points by a tight end all year last week with Trevor Lawrence. That is correct. You heard me say that correct. The most points by a tight end all year was scored by Evan Ingram. Not Travis Kelce, not Mark Andrews, not anybody else in the league. Evan Ingram. He's a big time athlete. He just needs that connection with Trevor Lawrence, and to get him the ball, he can make plays after the catch. He's been riddled with injuries. That's something you're probably still going to deal with in the future, but you need to pick up Evan Ingram if you're hurting a tight end. He's got a plus matchup this week against Tennessee. And Trevor Lawrence always seems to find him in the end zone. And I might have misspoken again. I told you he's playing Tennessee. Let me double check. Lied. He's playing at home against Dallas. I'm sorry. Kind of a tough matchup. I apologize. Kind of a tough matchup, but like I said, he has got the chemistry going with Trevor Lawrence. Honestly, he seems like he could be a number 2 pass catcher there. He's definitely at least number 3 behind Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, but he's had more targets than Christian Kirk the last couple weeks. So I mean, he could be ascending Christian Kirk, which is sad for Christian Kirk owners like myself. Could be ascending Christian Kirk as the number 2 pass catcher in that offense, and he's available in quite a few leagues. So I like Evan Ingram a lot, even though he's playing in a tough matchup at home against Dallas. I think he's still a safety blanket for Trevor Lawrence. Number 2 for me is going to be Tyler Conklin. For the same reason I like Elijah Moore. If Zach Wilson doesn't play, Tyler Conklin's been very, very good this year. Last week, I think he had 7 or 8 targets again, put up about 8 points. But this week, he's got Detroit at home, 28th against the tight end. If you got Flacco or White playing, they're going to be throwing the ball. I like Tyler Conklin a lot this week. And that's the only reason he is higher than this next guy who would have been number 2 for me. And that's Cole Kmet coming off a bye. He had 3 extremely good games right before the bye. Had a bye, got healthy. Justin Fields getting healthy. The only reason that he's not number 2 is because he's playing at home against Philadelphia, which is a fairly tough matchup. They're number 8 against the tight end, but he's pretty much the primary pass catcher in Chicago. They only throw the ball 20-something times a game, but he's getting like 6 targets. And that's like, that's a prime target. That's like 25% target share almost. So that's prime, prime real estate in that passing game. And he seems to be the tight end in the red zone. I mean, the primary pass catcher and red zone target now with all the touchdowns that he caught in the last 3 games before the bye. So I like Cole Kmet a lot. He's my number 3. Number 4. I'm going to do my best to say this name. God bless him. If you can't understand what I'm saying, it's Tennessee's tight end, not named Austin Hooper, but that is Chigoziem Okonwu. All right, Okonwu. That is Tennessee's tight end. Honestly, seems like another one of them athletic tight ends that Ryan Tannehill doesn't mind throwing the ball to. They're lacking in wide receivers in Tennessee with Treylon Burks going down, and Okonkwo seems to be stepping up. They're playing at the Chargers this week, which is kind of a mid-tier matchup. They're 14th against the tight end, but Okonkwo has played 50% of the snaps the last 2 weeks, and he's gotten at least 5 targets in the last 3. So, and he scored a touchdown last week. I think he was the number 3 or 4 tight end in scoring last week in PPR. So I like Okonwu. I mean, a fair amount more than I think you could do a lot better. I mean, do a lot worse than picking him up, playing him against the Chargers. And last, certainly not least, Not a ton of evidence to back this guy up, but Trey McBride for Arizona playing at Denver this week. Honestly, this has a lot more to do with the Kyler Murray injury, who does not throw a ton to us, did not throw a ton to Trey McBride. But Colt McCoy came in after his injury. Trey McBride had 6 targets yesterday. Only had, I think, 4 catches or 3 catches of those 6 targets, but still 6 targets nonetheless. Playing at Denver in a tough matchup for the wide receivers, but as far as the tight end, they're 21st against the tight end. And Colt McCoy is going to be the quarterback. He's going to use Trey McBride as a safety blanket with some top end corners on his wide receivers, and Denver's up front getting a fair amount of pressure. He's going to be checking down to that tight end a fair amount. I like Trey McBride this week at Denver. And also, Trey McBride was one of the top tight end prospects that got drafted coming out of the draft this past year, which was really surprising why they drafted him when they had Zach Ertz, but we're seeing it play out right now. This is why they drafted him, because of Zach Ertz's injury history, and he's getting his chance. So he's a really good athlete. He can make plays after the catch. I think you could do worse. And honestly, if Colt McCoy is going to be in there for the future, I think you need to pick him up before everybody else finds out that he's going to throw the ball to Trey McBride. And that's going to round out my lawn dart segment of the waiver wire. And we're going to move on to quarterbacks. Another really injury-riddled position this year in fantasy football, and honestly, not as deep as it has been in the past, which has made it really tough. But number one at the waiver wire position and the number one point-scoring quarterback in PPR last week, Jared Goff. That's right. I had him at number one last week, and he went off and put up 40-something points and was the number one scoring quarterback. That's right. Jared Goff, the number one scoring quarterback last week over Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, all Joe Burrow, all the other top end quarterbacks. Jared Goff was number one. That's right. And he's still on the waiver wire for most people. This week, tougher matchup playing at the Jets, but honestly, their offense is clicking on all cylinders. Their offensive line is giving him tons of time. They got tons of weapons for him to get the ball to. What's there not to like? Honestly, Jared Goff's kind of a poor man's 49ers quarterback. I would say Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's gone. You could have said Trey Lance, but he's gone. Brock Purdy's in there now, kind of with a rib injury, but Jared Goff, I mean, he's getting it done. And I really think a lot of people are just afraid to pick him up because it's Jared Goff and it's Detroit. But honestly, I think Jared Goff, he's definitely a top 10 quarterback the rest of the year and might be a top 6, maybe, but playing at New York Jets, which is going to be a tougher matchup, not as good a weather. Jared Goff normally doesn't play as good outside, but honestly, I think they're going to game plan for that. I think they're just going to try to do their best to get the ball into their playmakers' hands as quickly and easily as possible. And I think they know they're going to have to score against this Jets defense because this Jets offense is going to score against their defense. So I like Jared Goff, even though it's not the best matchup. And honestly, I like him for the rest of the season because they're trying to make the playoffs and get a wild card spot. So they're not going to be holding back at all. Number 2 for me is going to be Daniel Jones at Washington. Had a really tough matchup against Philadelphia last week. Came through with like 20, I think it was like 22 points. And honestly, at the quarterback position, if you don't have one of the elite quarterbacks and you've been kind of streaming, I think you could do worse than that. And this week, he gets a really good matchup at Washington against the 19th against quarterbacks. And he's got a pretty safe rushing floor. Typically rushes for, somewhere around anywhere 30 to 60 yards a game with, 4 to 10 rushes each game. Always has a chance to run that touchdown in there. So I like Daniel Jones this week at Washington against a better matchup than he had last week. Number 3, it's going to be Brock Purdy or Josh Johnson. Whoever it is for 49ers that starts at quarterback, that's who I want. Honestly, I hope it's Brock Purdy because he's a rookie. He looked really good. Looked like he had a good connection with all the offensive weapons. And with Deebo Samuel going down, I expect Brandon Ayuk to step up, but also George Kittle. Both Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, we were expecting to have kind of a down game with Brock Purdy coming in, and they kind of did. But after Samuel went down, Ayuk kind of stepped in and took over that role. I expect him to be the primary beneficiary because we know they don't want to lean on CMC too much because of his injury history. And honestly, I think they're just trying to coast to make it to the playoffs and get healthy. But I like Brock Purdy or Josh Johnson. Josh Johnson's got a good rushing floor. If he ends up playing, I expect Kyle Shanahan to get him on the move and honestly could be a real surprise at quarterback for the 49ers. And they're playing against a decent matchup at Seattle. Not the best environment, but they're 17th against the quarterback. Tons of weapons for them to get the ball to. Whoever starts for the 49ers, I expect them to have a decent week, and I'd pick up and stream whichever one they have. Fourth for me, a little bit different situation here. Fourth for me is going to be Mike White. I know he's dealing with a rib injury and everything, and honestly, it just takes one more hit to knock him out. You would think that, but heck, he played through it last week, and he got knocked out for a little bit. Flacco came in, then he came back. I mean, honestly, the dude's tough, and he's playing at home against Detroit, 31st against quarterback, one of the worst defenses in the league. They've been playing better of late, but Mike White's got the weapons to really break open this game. And I expect if he comes in, I expect him to have a good game. Joe Flacco could have a decent game, but I don't like him near as much as Mike White. That's why I didn't put both of them on here. And he has plenty of weapons. It's a plus matchup. If Mike White plays, I think you can get him in your streaming to get him in your lineup if you're hurting a quarterback. And last but certainly not least, this is one of those streamers or long-term pickups. If you're playing and you just got that empty bench spot, you're locked up, plenty of depth at all your other positions, and say you've been streaming quarterback a pretty good bit, you've got a decent streamer, you got Jared Goff, you're planning on streaming him, but you're just not sold on it. Pick up Desmond Ridder. Okay, played decent in the preseason, looked pretty confident. He doesn't have the weapons of some of these other younger cornerbacks, but he's going to get his chance. He's a mobile cornerback. Honestly, I've heard a lot of people compare his playing style to kind of a Patrick Mahomes, where he kind of scrambles a little bit, gunslinger, but has the arm cannon and the arm talent to make the plays that you need to be a gunslinger. So I really don't know what to expect from Desmond Ridder. It's a really tough matchup. Technically, as far as rankings go, it's not because they're playing at New Orleans in the Dome. But for a rookie to play at New Orleans in the Dome against the New Orleans defense coming off a bye, that's going to be a tough sell for me. I would not start him this week, but if you do need quarterback help and you've got a decent streamer in another bench spot, I think you could do worse than picking up Ridder, putting him on the bench just to see what he does this week. Again, a tough matchup because if he blows it up in New Orleans, in the Dome, on his first start against the New Orleans defense coming off a bye, if he blows it up on them, I mean, he could be somebody that could really be worth playing down the stretch for you in the playoffs. So I got Desmond Ridder at 5 because you just never know how these rookie quarterbacks are going to come out. I mean, look at Brock Purdy coming out for San Francisco. Nobody had any hopes of that being anything, and he kind of blew up. So, and he was not drafted with near the talent expectations that Desmond Ridder does. So Desmond Ridder coming in at number 5 for me, and that's going to round out our quarterbacks. We're going to roll right on into our defensive streamers, defensive special teams, whatever you want to call it. Number 1 for me is going to be Denver. Honestly, this just is because Colt McCoy is going to be starting. It's going to be at Denver in Mile High. It's going to be cold. It's probably going to be windy. Who knows? It might be snowing. And Denver's defense just intercepted Patrick Mahomes 3 times this week. Even though they lost to Mahomes, they intercepted him 3 times, sacked him another 2 times. What do you think they're going to do to Colt McCoy starting in Denver? So I like Denver's defense a lot in Denver. Heck, they probably will still lose the game, but that's not to say they're not going to get a couple turnovers. Their defense might not score a touchdown. Number 2 for me is going to be New Orleans. We just talked about it. Rookie quarterback starting in the Superdome, coming off a bye week for his first start of his career against the Saints defense coming off a bye. You can bet that the Saints D is going to be coming to play. And Dennis Allen is going to have that defense fired up and ready, especially against their arch enemy, arch rival, Atlanta Falcons. They are going to look, they're going to be coming for blood. And I want to be on the defensive end more than the offensive end. So I like New Orleans as number 2, and they're also available everywhere because they haven't really been doing as much as everybody expected. And then last but certainly not least, the Carolina defense playing at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We talked about it earlier. Kenny Pickett out with a concussion. Mitch Trubisky's in there. We all know Mitch Trubisky struggled mightily at the beginning of the year, which is why Kenny Pickett got his shot. And little to be known, Carolina's defense is number 9 in fantasy points on the year. Number 9. That's a top 10 defense going against a backup quarterback at home in Mitch Trubisky. I think you could definitely do worse than that. So I like Carolina a lot at home against Pittsburgh. And that's going to round out my top 3 streamers. Pretty much all 3 of them are available in a majority of leagues. So get out there, pick up one of those guys, stream them. And then last but certainly not least, the league winners for you each week, the kickers. And number 1 for me is going to be Greg Joseph playing at home against Indianapolis. Should be a fair amount of points scored this game. Minnesota's defense has been pretty poor. Indianapolis defense hasn't been that great. Minnesota's defense has been awesome. Indianapolis defense, I wouldn't say awesome, but whenever they play a poor defense, they put up points. So I expect Greg Joseph to have a fair amount of a fair chance to put up some points. It's in a dome, which is what we look for this time of the year in the winter. So I like Greg Joseph a lot. Number 2 for me, not in the dome, but Riley Patterson for Jacksonville playing at home against Dallas. Dallas is 27th against kickers, which means their defensive front has been stopping a lot of people in the red zone that have been settling for field goals. And Jacksonville's been moving the ball very well the last several weeks. So I expect Riley Patterson, who's had a very good last several weeks, to be a very good chance to have a fair amount of field goal attempts this week and put up some points for Jacksonville. So I like Riley Patterson a lot at home against Dallas. Number 2 for me is going to be Will Lutz at home against Atlanta. We just talked about it. I expect the defense to do fairly well against Atlanta's offense. Even if they move the ball a little bit, I expect New Orleans to get more opportunities than Atlanta. Also, I expect New Orleans offense to move the ball more against Atlanta and get Lutz into some good opportunities. Plus, it's in the dome, and Atlanta's 21st against kickers, so that means he's got a good chance to put up some points at home in the dome and in New Orleans. And then last but certainly not least, for the team with the worst record in the league and probably the worst offense in the league, Kymie Fairbairn for the Houston Texans. This past week, he played at home. Let's see. Yes, this past week he played at Dallas against Dallas. A very good defense against Dallas. But he had, a total of 3 field goal attempts and 2 extra point attempts against Dallas. Put up 16 points. Last week he had 7 points against Cleveland. This week he gets Kansas City, who does not have a very good defense, but probably has a good enough defense to stop Houston's offense. So, and it's at home in the dome in Houston. And he's coming off a hot game kicking the ball. I like his chances. We know Kansas City's going to score the ball. So Houston's going to be doing everything they can to move to get into field goal range. And I think they're going to take all the points they can get, even if they kick the ball, especially with Damian Harris being down. They're kind of limited in the running game. So I expect Fairbairn to have a good chance to kick some field goals this week. at home in Kansas City. And that's going to round out my kickers. And that's pretty much going to round out this podcast. So we appreciate everybody that's listening. Please like, subscribe, download, and follow us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, CastBox, whatever your streaming your podcast preference it is. Please like and subscribe and download. That's how we get our numbers up. And that's what these platforms pay attention to, is how much attention we get. Please leave us any comments that you have, any kind of feedback. We appreciate that. We appreciate everybody listening. Hopefully everybody listening out there made the playoffs. We know it's not likely, but hopefully it is. I made the playoffs in two of my 4 leagues. I normally try to go for 3 or 4 to make the playoffs and at least 1 win. This week, it's honestly not looking like I'm going to win any of them, because I've got some rough teams. I barely squeaked in the playoff in 1 league, and another league I'm kind of mid-tier right there in the playoffs. But it happens. That's why it's fantasy football. Nothing's for sure, but it's a lot of fun, and we really enjoy it. If you didn't make the playoffs, don't be one of those guys that just sits your lineup, doesn't plug in people, and doesn't fill out a lineup every week, because that's no fun, because the season's not over. Even if you're not making the playoffs, it's still fun just to get in there, look at who's playing, plug in your best guys, and see how many points you can put up. And if you're also in it, hopefully, if your league's not like this, I do implore you to think about convincing your commissioner, or if you are the commissioner, talking to your league and changing it where that even if you don't make the playoffs, the standings matter at the end of the year. What I do, or what we do in all of my leagues, we do inverse standings where, we do standings picks for the next year. So the way that works is whoever gets first place in the league gets to pick their spot they want to draft in the draft the next year. Instead of doing a random draft order like we used to do, now you can kind of use this as an advantage. So the people that don't make the playoffs still have something to play for, to not be that last choice to pick to draft in the next year. So the higher you rank at the end of the year in the standings, the higher of a choice you have to pick the next year. So say the person that won the league, they could pick, say they want to pick, 10th. Then they get to pick, and then they pick 10th in the draft. Then the second person, say he wants to pick first. The person that got second in the league, he wants to pick first. So he's got the first pick in the draft, so on and so forth. And that's just a good little easy way to kind of keep everybody engaged at the end of the year. If they're planning on sticking it out in the league for the next, and staying in the league next year, they've got something to play for, because they want to move up the standings as far as they possibly can to get a better chance to get a better draft pick the next year. So that's just a little tidbit. So don't leave your lineups empty, guys. Hang in there, and good luck to all the people that did make the playoffs. If you're still trying to make the playoffs, or if you're in the playoffs, good luck in the playoffs. And also, one last time, I want to thank all our sponsors: Big Reed BBQ, Elevate Clothing Line, Automotive Detailing Solutions. We really appreciate y'all sponsoring Dirty Boot Sports. And we really appreciate everybody listening. That'll wrap up this week, and we'll come back at y'all at the end of the week with start, sits, and sleepers.
This ain't how it's supposed to be. It should be just you and me. I feel that.